Dear participants, gathered in this meeting of hearts and of minds, the fellowship, full of desire for moments of inspiration, peace and joy. Atëherë të dashur pjesëmarrës në këtë takim zemrash, e mendje është të hapura, plot dëshirë për çastet të mësuesve, për qetësi edhe për gëzim. Është një ndjenjë e bukur t'i urosh mirëseardhje, një miku të dashur të ne, Zoti Dunbar, i cili për 37 vite të jetës së tij ja ka kushtuar shërbimit në qendrën kulturore bahai së bashku me bashkëshortën e tij. It is a very pleasant feeling to welcome a dear friend of us, Mr. Dunbar, who has dedicated 37 years of life service to the Bahai World Center together with his wife. Zoti Dunbar nga viti 1988 deri në vitin 2010 ishte antar i Shtëpisë Universale të Drejtësisë. Shtëpia Universale e Drejtësisë përfaqëson kreun e besimit bahai. In 1988-2010, Mr. Dunbar was a member of the Universal House of Justice, that is the head of the Bahai faith. Për të kuptuar sa të pak se cila është përgjegjësia e një antari të Shtëpisë Universale të Drejtësisë, më lejoni të lexoj disa rjeshta nga libri Dispensacioni Bahai-Allahut, duke cituar ruajtësin e çështjes. Forgetting a glimpse of responsibilities of a member of Universal House of Justice, allow me to read one paragraph from the dispensation of Baha'u'llah, where the Guardian says, in the conduct of the administrative affairs of the faith, in the enactment of the legislation necessary to supplement the laws of the Kitab al-Aqdas, the members of the Universal House of Justice, it should be borne in mind, are not, as Baha'u'llah's utterances clearly imply, responsible to those whom they represent, nor are they allowed to be governed by the feelings, the general opinion, and even the conviction of the mass of the faithful, or of those who directly elect them. They are to follow in a prayerful attitude the dictates and promptings of their conscience. They may indeed, they must acquaint themselves with the condition prevailing among the community, must weigh dispassionately in their minds the merits of any case presented for their consideration, but must reserve for themselves the right of unfettered decision. God will there inspire them with whatever He will. Is Baha'u'llah's incontrovertible assurance. Ruajtësi thotë, në ushtrimin e punëve administrative të besimit, në adoptimin e legjislacionit të nevojshëm për plotësimin e ligjeve të Kitabit al-Aqdas, duhet mbajtur parasysh se antarët e Shtëpisë Universale të Drejtësisë, siç e nënkupton qartë thëniet e Baha'u'llahut, nuk janë përgjegjës ndaj atyre që përfaqësojnë. As nuk lejohet të sundohen nga ndjenja, nga opinioni i përgjithshëm, madje as nga bindjet e masës së besimtarëve, ose të atyre që i zgjedhin drejt për së drejtë. Ata duhet të ndjekin duke u lutur diktatet e shtysat e përgjegjës së tyre. Ata munden në të vërtetë duhet të njihen me kushtet vizotruese në gjirin e komunitetit. Duhet i përshojnë pa pasion në mendjen e vetë dera të çdo rasti që u paraqitet për shërbim, por duhet i rezervojnë vetes të drejtën e një vendimi pavarur. Me të vërtetë, Perëndia do të frymëzojë atyre që do, për sigurimi pa dyshim që e Baha'u'llah. Të dëgjosh bisedat e Zotit Dunbar në YouTube, personalisht unë e kam bërë këtë, mbushesh me një këndvështrim të pasur në kuptuarit e mësimeve të Baha'u'llahut. Sot, Zotin Dunbar e kemi në dismesh dhe do ta dëgjojmë me kënaqësi dhe vëmendje. To listen to the talks of Mr. Dunbar in YouTube personally, I have been rich in understanding of the teaching of Baha'u'llah. Today, Mr. Dunbar is among us, and we will listen with joy and attention. Welcome and thank you. Përkthimesh I siguruar në vëmendje që thash.
It is a joy and an honor to be present with you here in Tirane. And it's an added pleasure as it was not part of my trip. I've been in Finland and Sweden and Germany and France and Spain and Greece, and just by chance and through the kindness of Ayam and Elham, they brought me here to Tirane. I could have gone to Athens and flown to Austria, which is my next destination. But they said you can fly from Tirane to Austria, and indeed that's what I've arranged to do. So I have a chance to visit another country on this visit. And I don't know whether that was in the introduction or not. I've been here before at the very beginning. What was it, 92, I guess. 1992. I came here and found a country that looked empty. It was very sad looking. Had a few Chinese trucks. Cars, you mostly didn't ever see a car. Shops. People were standing in line to buy a tomato. People were standing in line to buy a piece of bread. And you got to the line got to they said finished, it's finished. It was such a contrast. Now you have a modern country that's joined the other nations in material achievements. You know, the Baha'i community, friends, some of you, I think, may be hearing something about the Baha'is for the first time tonight. Let me say that with the coming of Baha'u'llah to Iran in the 1800s, a transformation began to take place in a population of people who were very fanatic in their religious outlooks. Between the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews and the Zoroastrians, there were terrific prejudices. I mean, prejudices that would lead to death if the shadow of one of those fell on another person. It was not acceptable, you know. You never touched anything that one of those kafir, one of those infidels had touched. You couldn't drink out of the same cup that they drank. Oh, so many fanatic things. And Baha'u'llah addressed his message. He said that his message was inspired by God for this time, so that we might become one nation, we might become one people all over the face of the earth. The planet is full of riches. We have human beings everywhere. We're gradually understanding that all the human beings are made of the same dust, are created by the same God, and have the same purpose. In the past, because of divisions and differences and distances, it was not possible yet to proclaim the oneness of the whole earth, of the whole globe. In fact, the previous religious messengers addressed a mankind that believed that the earth was flat. And it was only later that they discovered the wholeness of the earth. Baha'u'llah says that religious truth, the very heart of truth of the religions of the past, is like the water of the oceans. The oceans have different names, but if you look carefully, you'll find out that the water is all connected. The Mediterranean is connected to the Atlantic is connected to the Pacific to the Indian Ocean. So it's really one. He said, if you see the bounty of God, the teachings of God that have been brought by these great founders of the various religious communities around the world, you'll see that they have brought the means of peace, that they have always had the influence of uniting. Muhammad himself, in the West, they have such an idea that he was a warrior, a fierce fighter, and so on. But he really came to unite the tribes of Arabia, and then to unite all the other nations that followed in suit and became part of the great Islamic empire. So gradually, Baha'u'llah was able to bring together followers of these different groups who before wouldn't sit in the same room together, He taught them to be one people. And he called them Baha'is, the followers of the glory of God. And he said that this was to spread across the whole world and be the means of recreating mankind, of creating a new society, a new civilization, which would be for the first time a world civilization. Then he said that social evolution of mankind has started way back with Adam, where the first teachings of the prophet and the messengers of God were about the unity of family. After unity of family came the unity of tribes. After the unity of tribes became the establishment of city-states. After city-states, the concept through Islam particularly was the birth of nationhood, individual nations. Now Baha'u'llah calls us to the last stage of social development on this planet, the highest stage, which is international unity. But not international unity, but actually the consolidation of the nations into one world order. Some of the Baha'is certainly will be familiar with the phrase of Baha'u'llah, that the earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. Now when we think of an individual country, we think of the responsibilities we have to the nation and the responsibilities that the nation has to us. In other words, you expect the nation to be well run, to provide you with health, possibilities, and education, and justice in its system. So likewise, Baha'u'llah says that the riches of the earth don't belong to the people who live within certain lines that have been drawn on the face of the earth, but they belong to the whole of mankind. Now it's a big step, because the countries are so possessive of their riches and their natural endowments, you know. But eventually we have to see this. Why should a nation that's sitting on top of lots of oil live so much better than all the rest of the people of the world? It doesn't make any sense. So he calls us to social justice, justice for mankind. He says, why has God created us all of the same dust? He says he's done so that no one may exalt himself over anybody else. We should all realize we're all made of the same material. And as much as we might want to arise and conquer neighboring countries and so on, the Baha'i teachings say in the end you can only occupy 2 meters. There's no king, there's no emperor that's been able to occupy more than the size of his grave, which isn't very big. And he suggests that we learn to think and live in a different way, so that when we go to the next stage of our existence, which he promises is a more glorious stage, a better stage, a stage filled with the kind of goodness that we haven't always experienced here in this life. And he promises we'll be united again with our loved ones, and that we'll go on to new phases, new stages of development. I would say that of the religious teachings of the past, Baha'u'llah has written more than any of the past teachers about what the next world is like. He talks about the association there of those who are believers. Now, of course, we have initial image of that from Christianity, and then again we have beautiful teachings from the Quran on that subject. But Baha'u'llah expands it even more. It's quite fascinating. Originally I didn't know whether we have visitors here tonight or not, and I was going to talk a little bit about the origin of life according to the deeper teachings of the scriptures of the past. But I think after this little introduction, maybe I could move on with that and talk a little bit about it. It's quite amazing, you know. You'll remember in Christianity, stated in the Bible quite clearly that we've been created in the image and likeness of God. And also, in the subsequent scriptures, we have been endowed with what in Islam is called the fitra. That is, God has engraved on our realities, on our innermost realities, the gift of His presence, the gift of a particular set of talents and capacities that only you and you and you have. We don't have the same ones. We have all kinds of capacities, but the proportions of them are different. So this is why we see some souls very elevated in their understanding and their scientific vision and their rationality, and others that are more endowed with the capacity to shower love and sympathy and compassion on other souls. Each of us has an individual endowment, and God judges us after death on what we did with what He gave us, not with how much we did compared to the person sitting next to you, or how much we did compared with the former generation. It's the only thing that He judges us on is what He's given us, what He's endowed us with. In mystic terms, in spiritual terms, it says that He has made us from a sorry drop of water. And when you think of the very beginning of the conception of within the mother of a new being, there's just the joining of these physiological parts. He's endowed with some extreme mysterious capacity. Some little liquid has the pattern projected into it of our whole being, not only our being when we're babies, but every stage of our life is already written. And it comes into being like a seed. Look at this seed if you search the seed, you can't find the tree, you can't find the fruit, you can't find the flowers. But they're all there inherent as a spiritual endowment. They're a spiritual gift. And they are part of what is generally spoken of both in Islam and in the Bahai teachings as the breath of the All-Merciful. Through the All-Merciful, He has breathed life into our souls. Baha'u'llah expresses it in another way. He says, "Thou art my lamp, and my light is in thee. Get thou from it thy radiance." So this suggests to us that the breath of God is not something that happened a long time ago and He did it and then He said, well, it didn't turn out too well, I'm going to go do something else. This is not the nature of God. Through the names of God that we see in the scriptures, in the Quran and the other holy writings, He is not only the fashioner, He is the sustainer. He's the support. He's the protector. So these names of God continue to operate in us. He breathes life into us. He accompanies us. And He says, wake up, people. Remember. Try to remember when I created you. Try to remember what's in your inmost being. If you can get away from two things, He said, you will lift the veil and see the magic of creation, of the whole cosmos. The two veils are love of self and human passion. These two things, He said, have to be removed from the soul, from the heart, and then this light that He says is in us, we will become conscious of it. And other people will become conscious of it as well. Thou art my light, Thou art my lamp, and my light is in thee. Get thou from it thy radiance, is an eternal command of God, if you will. And then he provides us with the means whereby we can do this, because if we want to do it by ourselves, we find we keep failing. Actually, it's my understanding we will always fail until we lean on him. We lean on the compassion of God. We lean on the mercy of God to give us strength to be able to overcome our weaknesses, to act in the way he wants us to act with other souls. In the letters of the guardian of the Baha'i faith, he talks about forces of darkness. And he talks about these forces of darkness having overcome the world. At this period that we're in, there's a terrific sorting between darkness and light, clash. The call to nobility, the call to spirituality is very strong. But the influence of material goals, of material pleasures, of sensual pleasures, all of this is accumulated and created a certain shadow over the souls of men. And he said it's these principles that he's brought, and that his son Abdu'l-Baha proclaimed in the West, in Europe and all over America. Through these principles we can raise communities that are free from these things, at least that are battling against the forces of darkness. Now, in Baha'i community life, Shoghi Effendi says the Baha'is must be very cautious lest they begin thinking and feeling negatively about other Baha'is or about other people. He said as soon as you start thinking critically about another human being, these forces of darkness penetrate your spirit and make it see the light that's in you. That's very true. He doesn't say saying and announcing. He says thinking and feeling, which is now you've got the hypocrite, you've got the smiling, you know, looking at each other, and you're thinking, this is a dreadful person, I don't want to be with him. Why they became Baha'is and so on. The Baha'i teachings, Allah says, and he also from parallel in the Quran, we made some of you tests for others. Now, who doesn't know the truth of that? There's always somebody in the Baha'i community that annoys us, or that we would rather not associate with, because all the extremes of humanity are welcome in the Baha'i community. If we're going to have oneness of mankind, it's oneness of everybody. So naturally there's going to be types of people that by our upbringing, by our culture, we have prejudice, we have, God forbid, hatred. So Abdu'l-Baha calls on the Baha'is and says, you must become like sunlight. The kind of love of God, he says, that God has for you. That love doesn't look like a good person or a bad person. It's like what's shining that causes it to shine. It shines because it's that he wants us to reflect in our being is not a love that judges others. It's a love of God. It's an appreciation that God has taught us how to raise our thinking and how to see people in another way. He said if the people are annoying, he said think of them as children that haven't been educated. That they're people that haven't been trained. They don't know anything more. They need to be trained. Because a child comes and hits you, you don't make a war on him. You know that you have to teach him, you have to change his ways. So likewise, Abdu'l-Baha is busy teaching all of us to give up our prejudices. One of the basic principles of Baha'u'llah is to remove prejudices of all sorts: political prejudice, racial prejudice, religious prejudice, prejudices that arise from superstitions that we inherited from the past that really are not helpful to us. And he calls us to a vision again of the oneness of all mankind. That we see everybody as the children of God, as creatures of God. And inherent, everybody has this quality of the reflection and image in their inner reality, in their souls, in their spirits, in their hearts. So when we look at them, we have to try to think of that. The outside maybe has some bad habits and very unpleasant to be with, but we know there's something created by God, or they wouldn't be standing there before us. And we need to reflect deeply on this. And we need to check and see who is it that we think and feel negatively about, and try to remove that from our lives. He says, if the Baha'is do that, then the power of the Holy Spirit, the power of the messages and messengers of God will flow into the community and be like a magnet and attract other people. But if we can't get along, if we have our differences and grievances, that will keep us from growing spiritually. It will keep us from growing spiritually, and it will keep the Baha'i community from growing. So you need to ask yourself, is the Baha'i community growing bigger and bigger every time? And if it isn't, then we have to look at what could be the problems that keep it from that. It's very serious, friends. The House of Justice is the head of the Baha'i faith, and it presently is engaged in 5-year plans, one after the other, and it has certain core activities that it's been calling the Baha'is to establish in every local community around the world, which are classes for children, devotional meetings where we pray together, where we invite others to come and pray with us, junior youth programs to help rescue the junior youth before they start falling into the patterns of modern society, which are so detrimental, which lead to the children following their peer group rather than following their parents, which then leads to all kinds of sadness, both for the parents and for the children. And then it has an institute program, which is provided for the training of the Baha'is, for people who want to become Baha'is. This is called the Ruhi program. The present part of the training program is called Ruhi. Whether it'll always be that or not, the House defined the institute program before it said what it would consist of. And its purpose is to ground us in the essential verities, the essential truths of the Baha'i faith and of the Baha'i community throughout the world. In the last year of the Guardian's life, this is Shoghi Effendi, during the World Crusade, 1956, 1957, he had his secretary write a number of instructions to the Baha'is around the world. And in those instructions, repeatedly, he named 4 steps if we want to be successful in service to baha'u'llah and to the needs of mankind at the present time. They're fairly obvious, the 4 steps, but sometimes we slip away and we don't use them sufficiently. And in moving around the Baha'i world, wherever I see that the Baha'is are saying things like, we want to share the faith with other people, but nobody's interested, it makes me go back to these quotations, where he says, if you want to have success, these are the steps you have to take. If we leave the steps out, we don't have success. The first of the steps that he gives is prayer. The importance of being regular in our prayers. And as you know, Baha'u'llah has assigned certain daily prayers. Not terribly long. The longest of them is, 10 minutes or something. And out of 24 hours, it's really not a lot of time. Abdu'l-Baha says, this is a law that is not your free will is to choose it and follow it, but not to choose to not follow it. You can choose to not follow it. That doesn't help you at all. And he says that there are two excuses for not saying the obligatory prayer. The name of these prayers that are given to us to say each day is, in English, is called obligatory prayer. And he says one of those excuses is that you're so sick on your bed that you can't get up. You have fever or you're dying and you can't do it. Okay, that's one. The other, he says, is you're mentally ill. Now, if you miss your prayer, you have to choose one of those two, so otherwise you're in trouble. So we really want to be very strict with ourselves about those. Then there's all these other occasional prayers, that is, other prayers that are not obligatory prayers. And they actually, in the Oriental languages, they have a different name. They're not both called prayers. One has another name, one is, the nature of it is obligatory prayer. Abdu'l-Baha says the repeating of this obligatory prayer provides safety to you for the day that you're in. It's the source of safety. You know, we all want to go out of the house and not have problems during the day, and we don't want our family to have problems. It's really important that we have that. The rest of the prayers, as you examine them, you see what they're for. You created me a pure heart, oh my God. It calls us to certain spiritual attitudes and ways of seeing. Besides prayer, he said, the next stage is meditation. And he said meditation is different from prayer. Prayer is we're invoking God. We're asking things of God. But meditation is after we ask and we read the verses of God. And he said we should read these verses like the hidden words, morning and evening. Read a few of them and then think about them. What does this mean? They're not just to be read, as Allah says, but to be lived. So we have to think, how can we put the hidden words into our actions? He says if we do that, the whole world will begin to change. And it will be a magnet which will attract other people to us. Now, I think we all have our moments in which we say to ourselves, I try to teach the faith, but nobody wants to hear about it. You know, it's very difficult to share it, because all the Baha'is are called by Baha'u'llah to proclaim the cause of God to everyone. Meanwhile, we get it confused with proselytizing, which is really trying to get people to join a sect or a church or something of the sort, whereas what we're talking about is just saying to them, there is a truth that we have in the world now that we didn't have before. And it's called the Baha'i teachings. And Baha'u'llah is the source of them. If we don't say anything else to the people that we meet, and maybe the people that we're only going to meet once, we want to have them hear the word Baha'i. Maybe they don't pay any attention. Maybe they go to their computer and look it up and see what is this anyway, you know. Now we have that possibility. I hope that in the newspaper and everything else you put some websites where people can go. You know what the Baha'i teachings are? See bahai.org or bahai.al, I don't know, whatever you have. They're very important. There's a lot of people waiting to hear about the faith. Shoghi Effendi says we should pray that we find the people that really want to hear about the faith. In the United States, they're on the Facebook, they're putting some advertising, and people are coming out of nowhere. Just a couple of months ago, they put, for 2 days, they put advertising in Manhattan Island. 70 new people showed up at the Baha'i Center for a meeting that had never come before. Everybody was totally startled. Well, we say the people are not interested, and maybe we're not finding the people that we need to pray to find waiting souls. Now, those of you who are here tonight, maybe for the first time or hearing about the Baha'i, so what is all this? Baha'u'llah has brought the message that solves mankind's problems. And we need to tell people that such a thing exists. If they show interest, he says teach them. share the teachings with them. But if they don't show interest, don't push anybody. Leave them to themselves. You've mentioned that such a thing exists. There is something in the human psyche that catches this word Baha'i and says, I better find out what this is. Sometimes they hear about it once, and then after some time, after some months, they hear that their cousin Jeremy is a Baha'i, and they say, what? Or they see an article in the newspaper that says, the Baha'is in Iran, what? And they start thinking, maybe I should find out what this is. That's just something growing, you know. So Abdu'l-Baha addresses this question of how shall we find receptive souls. He says, if in a forest one tree is ablaze, is on fire, burning, how can the other trees resist? The fire is going to catch. So generally the problem of sharing the Baha'i teachings with other people is that we're not sufficiently on fire with it ourselves. And I think we've all seen Baha'is who are on fire, and we immediately feel the effect of that. And whether we're doing enough or not doing enough doesn't depend on what anybody else in the community does or doesn't do. It depends on looking at Abdu'l-Baha and comparing what we're doing with what Abdu'l-Baha did. Because he says, look at me, be as I am, try to follow the pattern that he has. And he's given these wonderful talks that reach the hearts of people and reach their minds, reach intellectuals, reach people of sincere love for humanity. Oh, very, very interesting from that point of view. The third, we talked about 4 now, we got 2, prayer and meditation. Meditation is when you ponder and ask yourself the meaning of the verses of God. There's no fixed formula of meditation. And Shoghi Effendi said the friends should be free to choose their own level of spirituality or spiritual search. But he said also, he recommends, if we're going to meditate, rather than following somebody else's method, and you know, there's all these methods out there that sit and empty your head and focus on your navel, and then you'll see something, I don't know, a very strange thing. He said, instead of that, ponder the verses that Baha'u'llah has revealed. For instance, if you look at the Book of Certitude, which Baha'u'llah has written to carry us through spiritual transformation and enable us to feel the presence of God in our hearts and in our souls, he says so many places, consider, ponder, reflect, meditate at the beginning of paragraphs. Have we done that? It's something that we need to include in our daily readings. We read, then we should reflect and think, what's he saying here? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my family? What does this mean for my community? The third one is study. Study the writings. He said, inform yourself of all the various books and teachings which the Baha'i are at the heart of the Baha'i message and are impelling Baha'is forward everywhere to carry out the plan of Baha'u'llah. And that's a job that should make of us readers. If we don't have a habit of reading, we're hardly likely to take interest in the history of the cause. The history, as you know, if you've read any history at all, it's fascinating history of the early Baha'is, the Nabil's narrative, and the other books by Mr. Tarzadeh and The Hand of the Cause, Mr. Balyuzi, about the Baha'u'llah, King of Glory. Fascinating works of history. And this history has been confirmed by non-Baha'i historians. And that becomes quite interesting to see. This is not just something made up by the Baha'is. This is documented all in the books of Gobineau and other European writers. Many of these things have been explained. Many of the teachings have been counted. As I said, in the 1850s, Baha'u'llah came and gave his message. So Baha'u'llah was born 200 years ago, the Bab, his herald, the forerunner of his faith, who we are about to celebrate the bicentennial of his birth now in October, is something that we want to ponder. In the summer schools where I've been giving a course about what do the Baha'i teachings say about this position and significance of the Bab. Baha'u'llah says that he has a very central position. He calls him the king of the messengers of God, the king of the Rasul. Imagine. He says that the prophecies of Islam say that knowledge can be considered to be 27 letters. He said, up to the time of the coming of the Qayyam, the coming of the Bab, 2 letters have been revealed and taught, knowledge of 2 parts of 27 parts. He said, with the coming of the Bab, he's brought the other 25 letters. He's brought the rest of all possible knowledge and revealed it in his revelation. And in the World Center, we have now accumulated many writings of the Bab, and we put them on the computer, and they add up to 5 million words. That's more than double all the Holy Scriptures of all the revelations of the past. I don't know how many times over, but it definitely surpasses the combined number of everything in the past. Well, 2 letters of 27 against 25 letters, and you would think, of course, it has to be very large. And we still haven't collected all the writings of the Bab. There's still writings of his showing up. Terrific insight into the scriptures of the past. Commentaries on the Quran. Quite marvelous things. Just that help. Prayers. Did you see the prayers of the Bab? Of course, you have in the Baha'i prayer book, you have prayers of the Bab. How closely we can associate and identify with the things that are asked for in those prayers. And shouldn't we be especially using them in this period building up to the bicentennial to honor his mission, his effects on mankind? Well, friends, I don't know how long I've been talking, but I think it's about an hour. And I wonder if some of you or some of your guests, some of the friends that are here tonight for the first time, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, we can ask the chairman if he would coordinate this. And the 4th. Oh, he wants the 4th. That's the hardest one, I think, and that's action. Yes, I should certainly mention that. Okay, so we have prayer, we have meditation, we have study of the words of the scriptures, and then we have action. So 3 of these are things we do inside to prepare ourselves so our action is effective. So that when we talk about, we don't talk nonsense, we talk something that actually is in the writings. Sometimes Shoghi Effendi said we have a favorite principle, and we always, that's your favorite principle or my favorite principle, we always talk about that, and we add our own ideas onto it, and it becomes a blur, you know. Whereas you want to, when giving the message, you want to ask Baha'u'llah to inspire you to mention those things that the listener needs to hear at that time. And we have you see them reflected in the prayers, where we ask for inspiration. So when we're teaching, when we're sharing the Baha'i message, we don't speak just from ourselves, but we have the question that he said, there's a confirmation that comes. We're surrounded by spiritual influences that can guide us to say things that we never thought before. It's quite mysterious. I would hope that tonight I've answered some of the questions that you may have had in the past. Usually it happens in a meeting, somebody comes up and said, oh, I had a question, but you answered it. You know, so it's okay, that's good. But that's the spirit of the Baha'is, is they want to be able to present the inspiration from the Baha'i teachings. So action is really sharing, it's taking action, it's serving mankind, it's serving in some ways, kindness to others, the love that we express for society, for our country, for our human condition, for other human beings. And Sharif Effendi says our actions to share the faith with others should be with perseverance and also with sacrifice. And in a letter he explains, in several letters he explains, there's 3 kinds of sacrifice that are required for the Baha'i faith to go forward. It's like the gas inside of an engine. You need sacrifice to make the car go forward. He said the sacrifice is financial. That is, we need to contribute. Nobody tells us how much to contribute, and nor checks to see whether we are contributing. But we need to contribute. We have treasures in the community. There's places where we give our funds. He said we should give sacrificially. If we give sacrificially, we receive confirmations. And one place, Abdullah says, if it's given with sincerity, you'll get it back 10 times over. Now sometimes the Baha'is have asked me, when does that happen? You know, I did that and I can get 10 times back. All right, be a little patient. Maybe he wants to test you a bit. But in the end, you'll see that is a wonderful promise. The second one, he says, is our time. We have to sacrifice time. You've had to sacrifice time to come here tonight. But that's part of a learning process. Okay, maybe you heard something that'll be helpful or not. But the point is that it takes time away from other things we want to do. And that's a sacrifice. And we have to realize it's a sacrifice. That is the third one, he said. Can you imagine what the third one is? Your person. He says you have to sacrifice your person. That is your idea of who you want to be in the world and what you want to do with your time and your efforts and your education. You have to leave some of that aside to provide time to participate in the Baha'i activities, to study the writings, to pray, and all the other things that are necessary. So there you have it. Financial sacrifice, sacrifice of our time, and sacrifice of our person. I think I want to have 3 doctorates. Well, do I need 3 doctorates? Is that really, I got to think about it. Wait, how much time do I give to the plans? How much time do I give to myself? How much time do I give to my family? And of course, all of this has to be done with some moderation. But sacrifice implies going beyond moderation. And he says sacrifice in these 3 areas brings spiritual growth to us and moves the cause of Baha'u'llah forward. So, I said that's number 4. Action, the right kind of action. This persevere in action was a theme of the Guardian during the 10-year crusade between 1953 and 1963. Some of you will have heard of Bill Sears. Bill Sears was a hand of the cause. Bill Sears went on pilgrimage in the early part of the crusade to the Holy Land, and he visited the shrines and the holy places, and then he sat at the table of the Guardian. And one night he said the Guardian was talking about pioneering, how important pioneering was. So Bill said, I asked, pioneering to where? And the Guardian, he said, looked at it and he said, Africa. And then Bill said, where in Africa? South Africa. Where in South Africa? Johannesburg. He said, I stopped then because I knew he was going to give me the address of the house I was going to live in. So he went there actually, and went to South Africa and went to Johannesburg and lived on a farm. And because of apartheid, blacks and whites couldn't meet together. So he hired all the Baha'is to take care of his farm. And then they had their institute in the barns. And they had some lookouts on the road in case anybody came that would see whites and blacks together. They sent a signal to the house and they all were separate from each other. And somehow the teaching spread that way in South Africa, so we have a national community, we have a national assembly there. Quite amazing. Anyway, he was also a humorous guy, and he got a cartoonist because some of the goals that people went to were so difficult. And in this cartoon, he draws a little island about the size of this platform with one coconut palm growing in it. And a couple, a man and his wife, was dressed in rags, standing in the water. They've just pulled a bottle out of the water. This island is uninhabited. It's out in the middle of nowhere. And there's a notice, there's a paper in the bottle, so they pull the paper out and they open the paper and they read the paper, and the paper says, "Persevere, Shogi." It's their message. Anyway, they said the Guardian saw it and he laughed a bit about it too, because he was constantly telling the people, don't, stick to your post. When you go out and open a place, don't leave it. And the kind of things we need to do in our own country to sustain the faith, we need to do with regularity and the right spirit, so that it will bring that sacrifice of time and our efforts will bring reward, and the cause will grow. Now we have all these plans, the collective plans that the board members and the National Assembly tells us about, the House of Justice emphasizes. I think that our individual plan, our individual responsibility are these 4 things, these 4 steps. And if we take them and make a sincere effort to study the cause more, to pray more, to meditate more, the effect of that on our collective action will be very good. But I perceive that some of the Baha'is think that when they get into collective action, that's going to make them happy and give them spiritual reward. Maybe it does, but sometimes they come out saying, no, I did all that and nothing happened. We have to take something to it, not expect it to give us something back, it seems to me. And where the communities are getting this idea of bringing their own spiritual resources to the plan, things are developing and the cause is growing. So this is a kind of invitation from Shoghi Effendi to, if you want success in the teaching field, study of the word, prayer, meditation, and then action seems to be the secret. All right, can I look at my watch again? Maybe you have some questions and answers. In any case, it's a joy to see you all. Your faces are radiant. And, as I say, I remember Albania from that early trip when there wasn't much to eat, actually. We went all over the country, down to Saranda.
Some of the cities are mentioning now, the friends that are here, where you were.
I can't remember all the names of them, I think.
Okay, maybe I can invite some of the friends to raise and say a name of city that they have been with you.
All right.
Okay.
I don't know if any of these have been with me. Have you been?
Maybe. I have been one of them in Tirane in 1992.
Wow.
I was one. Another one who was in Tirana too. He's raised. Okay. Fear.
When I asked you the question, if you permit me, are we going to have a film about bahai.al? So now we will have a film also for that. So we have more than 2 decades.
I hope everybody's understanding in both languages here. Is that right? You're having some
Yeah, we have translations. Atëherë miq, kush që është të bëj pyetje? Puntem rieka to Gusht. So, dear friends who want to make a question, you can raise where he stands and you can make a question. Ще може быть ответить. Puntem rieka to Gusht. So, dear friends who want to make a question, you can raise where he stands and you can make a question. Edhe për praktik kemi ndihmën e Kionit edhe Vojsakës, ku do që ta formuloj anglishtën.
So when you don't have any questions, I say to myself, oh, you gave a talk that was so clear that nobody has any questions. That makes me feel good. But the opposite of that is the talk was so confusing that I don't know what to ask. Yes, please.
I have a request for you.
Okay.
Could you please bring our love to Austria, to the Austrian friends? We cannot all go there, and many of us have never been there and do not know those people. But if you carry it, our love can go.
Now where did you want me to carry that? I missed the first part.
To Austria.
To Austria, okay. All right, that's easy enough. I should be able to remember that for one day. Anyway, thank you. There's some very nice believers in Austria. Have you been to Austria and have you been to Austria? The believers are, you know, isolated. Please.
Would you like to tell us, would you like to tell us more about your background story? Like, maybe it'll take a while, but you told, like, you're not born in a Baha'i family, is that clear? Or how was
You're asking
that?
about my background?
Yeah, how was it to meet?
I was raised in a Christian family, and I was searching for truth. When I was 17, I was reading Buddha, I read some of Muhammad, some of the Quran, Christianity, of course. And I was thinking, these are all saying the same thing. Why are these people fighting with each other, making the wars that we have? It's a good question. And I became rather cynical that I didn't know why I was alive. I wanted to know why I'm alive. And I began to invoke, okay, if there's some consciousness bigger than my consciousness, my little consciousness, make me know you're there and what I'm here for. And I had a profound spiritual experience that just came on me one night when I was in the garden praying about it. And the next week, a friend who I've known for some time said, "There's a Baha'i prayer book, you should know about this." And he took me to meet some Baha'is, and I went to a fireside, as they call them then, and the lady gave a talk, and she was like a nightingale, such a beautiful talk. And in that talk, I felt the feelings of the spiritual experience come back to me. So I knew this is it. And then I asked about how do you become a Baha'i, the hostess, because I was so excited about feeling the thing again that I was laughing, having to cover my face. I was laughing with joy. I think the hostess, the lady, there were about 80 people there, you know, she was thinking, the one person that comes and asks, how do you become a Baha'i, is this crazy kid who's on drugs or something. So immediately I changed my story. I said, no, I'm just asking how do people become Baha'is? And friends, it wasn't easy in those days. You have to read Baha'u'llah, the New Era, you have to read the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, and the Will and Testament of Abdul-Baha, and then you have to write an essay to the local assembly why I believe in Baha'u'llah. That was the hardest one to read. And then you go and the assembly tests you and asks you some questions to see if you properly read the material. Has anybody in the room gone through that experience? I don't think so. The assembly interviewed me, and then they said, "This is a very small house. Would you mind standing in the street while we discuss your case?" So I went and stood in the street. And 40 minutes later, they called me back. I thought they'd have a terrible time deciding whether I could be a Baha'i or not. But the chairman said, as it turns out, the local assembly hadn't met for 8 months. So we had a little business we wanted to do before we had you say the closing prayer. Well, then I understood what happened, and I understood later that they shouldn't have not been meeting for 8 months. But that was the condition of this particular community that I became a Baha'i. And it had lots of problems. And they began bragging about how they've sent out more pioneers than any other community in that area in Southern California. And then after a little bit, I understood why everybody was going pioneering. And I went pioneering. There's a whole other dimension to that, which is interesting but not essential. That is, I was a film actor. I acted on the lead in a play in New York, and then I came back and got into some films and then television series and so on. So the Baha'is were all excited to hear somebody was gradually going up in the entertainment would be so valuable, you know, and then I wanted to go pioneering. They said, "You're crazy, we need you here. Why are you going pioneering?" I said, "The guardian is alive and he's telling me to go pioneer, so I'm trying to go." Everybody else had an excuse. I have an old mother, I have little children, I don't have any money, my job only works here. Everybody had an excuse, but the guardian was hoping to